From the inception of video game culture and design, the number 3 has followed players across titles, genres, and franchises. A recurring number that doesn't seem to go away, from the 3-phase boss fights in Mario, to Destiny public events having 3 distinct phases, and let's not forget the design behind video game tutorials. So, in today's video, I'm explaining everything you need to know about why the number 3 is in gaming, from behind the game design, to behind the human psychology, and so much more. But before we dive into gaming, I want to help you understand some of the psychology behind the number 3 and why it's used. Because this concept goes back centuries, even millennia, to when stories weren't told via video game consoles or Netflix, but rather human storytellers. Ever heard of stories like The Three Blind Mice, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, or Charlie Dickens' A Christmas Carol? Well, something these stories all have in common is their usage of the number 3. The Three Blind Mice has, well, 3 blind mice. Goldilocks and the Three Bears uses 3 bears and a girl named Goldilocks who tries out each of the bear's belongings 3 times, with the 3rd item being just right. And Charlie Dickens' Christmas Carol has a character named Ebenezer Scrooge who is visited by 3 separate spirits that present him with Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future. In fact, this pattern of 3 extends beyond just storytelling and is in fields like oration and marketing. Some of the world's greatest speakers, like Martin Luther King Jr., Winston Churchill, and Thomas Jefferson, used this pattern of 3 to drive home points to those who were listening. Martin Luther King Jr. used the rule of 3 when emphasizing justice, goodwill, and brotherhood in his speech, Nonviolence and Racial Justice. And to further prove the point of the psychological power behind 3, one of those men I mentioned, Winston Churchill, once said, "Blood, toil, tears, and sweat" in a speech, but because the rule of 3 is such a prevalent part of our minds, people forgot that he said 4 things and it was all merged into blood, sweat, and tears because it sounded better. But why? Why do we humans subconsciously long for things in the rule of 3 structure? Firstly, 3 is a number that's within the perfect range of complexity for people to understand. I found a Microsoft article that perfectly summarized this, saying, 3 elements can create a sense of completeness and balance instead of a pair, which can seem at odds with each other. It gives the audience a sense that they have heard everything they need to know about a particular topic. Truly a perfect way to put it, because once you start dividing information and topics into 4 or more different points, the person conveying the information risks losing the audience's train of thought for a variety of reasons. It may be boring and difficult for them to remain interested in what you're saying the more you divide the information. And the second reason is that it just may be too much to process, and anything more you add will be forgotten. In fact, research concerning short-term memory backs this up. It's been found that the average person can remember 7 separate pieces of information at any point. But in regards to processing and manipulating that information in their mind, the number is reduced to just 3 or 4. This is why 3 is the optimal number to divide information into groups of. Secondly, the rule of 3 fits right in with our brain's love of patterns. Whether you realize it or not, your mind craves completion. If you were to envision 2 dots in your mind, you'd create a line. However, if I gave you 3 points, you'd likely create a triangle, once again highlighting your subconscious love for completion. Our love of patterns also satisfies our mind's desire for predictability, which reduces uncertainty, and efficiency, allowing for quicker and more decisive decisions. But why? Why does our mind prefer patterns in 3 rather than a number like 1 or 2, which are simpler? Well, 1 is often associated with being too simple and lacking context, and 2 is binary, and is associated with contrast or opposition. 3 is perfect, as it allows for just enough complexity without inducing any mental or cognitive strain on the average person. And further supporting the argument, one of the most popular stories of all time, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, uses patterns to tell its story. With Goldilocks finding the 3rd item as just right each time, most listeners will have no idea that the story's pattern is catered for their subconscious enjoyment. And thirdly, you and I have been trained in this rule of 3 for nearly our entire lives. From the stories we've read like Goldilocks, to marketing slogans like "Just Do It," "Reduce, Reuse, Recycle," and more, these have conditioned us to appreciate these patterns. Even within our own education system, children are taught to use memory techniques that favor the rule of 3 system to help anchor information. But how does this all connect to the world of gaming? Well, it fits perfectly. The first and most common method of using the rule of 3 in gaming is within tutorial systems. The usual structure in which tutorials work is that new information is presented first, then the game lets you try whatever new feature has been added in a more controlled and directed setting, before letting you do a final run with whatever new feature without the game heavily directing you. This format of conveying information is perfect for gamers of all ages who can clearly understand what they have unlocked and how they can best utilize it, which ensures that the players are properly educated while reducing the risk of frustration, which could cause the players to quit the game. Furthermore, games like Mario, Cuphead, and more use a 3-stage system for their boss fights. Now, why use this system? Well, a good reason is that the 3-stage system perfectly fits within a topic I was covering earlier, and that's the average person's mental capacity or patience. 3 phases is enough for players to feel engaged and like they're making progress, and it gives game developers and writers room to keep the game interesting and tell a story. For example, some games using this format will have their boss's abilities become stronger against the player to keep the player on their toes. And for writers, sometimes these phases of the boss fight allow for new dialogue and plot development that hits a lot harder for players because the player's more engaged in this moment than they would be reading or listening to dialogue during the rest of the game. And another key area featuring the rule of 3 is video game storytelling. Similar to plays or movies, video games trying to convey a deep story to their player base may employ the 3-act structure. An example of this can be found in the worldwide hit The Last of Us Part 1 when dealing with Joel's character arc. At first, we establish Joel's flaw. He's emotionally shut down, losing his sense of humanity, and being a man looking to survive regardless of others. But then, Joel encounters Ellie, which changes him. He finds it difficult to continue being the grumpy man, and starts to empathize with Ellie and lose some of the rough and tough guy energy he had before. Now, he's starting to care about someone in a way that he hadn't felt in years since his daughter's death. And at the end of the game, Ellie has changed him. He's transformed. He's no longer a man who can willingly walk away from a girl who was just supposed to be another job. His conscience and morality are seemingly turned back on after years of doing whatever without thought or care for others. So, Joel steps up and takes on all of the Fireflies, risking his life to save Ellie from death so that she doesn't have to die for others. This 3-part structure is subtly woven into The Last of Us, but also woven into many aspects of gaming. Now, there are so many examples of how the number 3 can be spotted throughout gaming in the wider world, but it can all be boiled down to this, and I don't know if I stole this quote, but I couldn't find anyone to credit for it, so it goes, "Art is a reflection of the artist." It makes sense for video games to contain these patterns because these are humans making them. Our natural tendencies and preferences are reflected in what we make. And this isn't to say things don't stray from the rule of 3 structure, but it's something that's shown to be a balanced and effective way of communicating information, stories, and so much more. Like the video if you learned something. See you next time.